This is Daily Homeless News, where tell the stories no one else will. Come to Oakland, they say, where opportunity thrives and dreams are built. But the only thing growing faster than luxury condos are the tent cities blooming beneath the freeway overpasses. In the glossy brochures, Oakland is a rising star. In reality, it's the latest battlefield in the fight against a homelessness crisis that has become America's quiet civil war. Here, the signs of collapse are no longer hidden. They sleep in doorways, line freeway shoulders, and gather in the cracked lots behind newly built condos. This isn't the aftermath of some natural disaster. It's a human-made crisis, the latest chapter in the story of homelessness in America. Before we dive deeper into the brutal reality unfolding on Oakland streets, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your voice in the comments below. We don't just report the headlines, we expose the truth they don't want you to see. Together, we can drag these stories out of the shadows and into the light, exactly where they belong. In the heart of Oakland, just beyond the polished downtown skyscrapers and the humming tech corridors, another story is playing out. A story most would rather pretend isn't happening. Every day, a quiet humanitarian crisis unfolds in plain sight. As of 2024, more than 5,490 individuals in Oakland are experiencing homelessness, a 9% increase from just 2 years prior. This isn't simply a big city problem, something that happens in far-off corners beyond our reach. It's a glaring symptom of a much deeper wound, yet another grim chapter in the broader homeless in America crisis. What's even more staggering is that 67% of those experiencing homelessness here are unsheltered. That means thousands of people are living day and night without a roof over their heads, surviving inside tents, broken down cars, makeshift shacks, or simply out in the open, exposed to the elements and constant danger. And the crisis is hitting new faces. An alarming 57% of those currently without housing have never been homeless before. Many of them were pushed into the streets not because of personal failure, but because of systemic collapse, a direct consequence of the expiration of pandemic-era eviction protections that once provided a fragile lifeline. Now, with little to no safety net remaining, people who once lived stable lives have found themselves trapped in an unforgiving cycle of survival. The numbers tell a devastating story, but they don't even begin to capture the human cost. The daily loss of dignity, safety, and hope happening right here in Oakland, just steps away from booming tech companies and luxury developments. Oakland's social safety net, already stretched thin by years of neglect, is now fraying beyond repair. What was once designed to catch people in crisis is failing under the weight of sheer need. About 31% of the city's homeless population struggles with severe mental health conditions, untreated, unaddressed, and largely unseen. Another 25% wrestles daily with substance abuse, a battle compounded by a lack of consistent care, stable housing, or real opportunities for recovery. In response, the state introduced SB 43, alongside initiatives like Care Court, to forcibly intervene when mental illness or addiction becomes visibly catastrophic. But these programs, while well-intentioned on paper, draw fierce criticism from advocates who argue they are reactive at best. They step in only after lives have already unraveled, not before. True prevention remains elusive. Instead of building long-term solutions like permanent supportive housing, Oakland's strategy often defaults to short-term emergency responses, temporary shelters, crisis clinics, and public cleanups that shuffle people from one sidewalk to another without solving anything. It's a pattern as old as the Homeless in America crisis itself, a bandage hastily slapped over a wound that demands real surgery. Without a serious commitment to affordable housing, accessible mental health care, and meaningful addiction services, these efforts will continue to amount to little more than political theater offering headlines without hope. And the people left behind, they aren't statistics. They are our neighbors, our veterans, our families, left to fall through a net full of holes. We talk about solutions, we talk about compassion, but when it's time for real action, what do we actually get?
Oh, if I get the coronavirus, I'm dead. Whatever that is. We up under this bridge, right? Because of this virus thing that's going on. Church up under the bridge is not able to come up here and give us clean clothes, food. How are you going to stay healthy out here? Then you need food to stay healthy out here.
By 2024, the lingering aftershocks of COVID-19 were still rippling through Oakland's homelessness crisis. The city saw a 9% increase in its homeless population from 2022 to 2024, rising to nearly 5,500 individuals, despite a slight decrease across Alameda County overall. Around 2/3 of Oakland's unhoused were still living unsheltered, sleeping in tents, vehicles, or makeshift structures. Although emergency programs like Project Roomkey and Homekey had temporarily curbed the explosive rise in homelessness during the pandemic, many of those programs were winding down by late 2023. As funding dried up and temporary shelters closed, formerly housed individuals faced renewed displacement, especially those with disabilities or chronic illnesses. In 2024, a shift in California policy, along with a controversial Supreme Court ruling, allowed cities to clear homeless encampments more aggressively. Oakland followed suit by shutting down some of its pandemic-era shelters, including RV-safe parking sites and community cabins. For many, that meant returning to the streets just as pandemic protections ended. The fallout hit Black and Latino communities hardest, echoing the racial inequities deepened by COVID-19. In early 2025, newly elected Oakland Mayor Barbara Lee declared the situation a moral emergency and rolled out a bold response. Guaranteed income pilot programs for the unhoused, expanded permanent supportive housing, and job training initiatives tied to public works projects. These policies mark a shift from short-term pandemic relief to longer-term structural solutions. Still, the road ahead remains steep. While COVID-19 didn't cause homelessness in Oakland, it dramatically accelerated it. The crisis of 2024 and 2025 is the pandemic's legacy, one that exposed how fragile housing security truly is. Whether Oakland can turn the corner depends on sustained investment, political courage, and a deeper commitment to treating housing as a human right. In Oakland, promises are loud, but results are whisper quiet. Oakland's leaders have made plenty of noise about tackling homelessness. There have been press conferences, task forces, strategic plans, all wrapped neatly in sound bites about compassion and commitment. But peel back the surface, and the reality tells a different story. Most actions feel less like solutions and more like an elaborate PR campaign designed to polish the city's image without ever touching the rock underneath. In 2024, more than $7.2 million was allocated to close 3 major encampments and move people into temporary hotel shelter. On paper, it sounds like action. In practice, it barely dents the crisis. Moving people from sidewalks to hotel rooms with no long-term strategy isn't a solution. It's a game of musical chairs played with human lives, and when the music stops, most are still left standing in the street. Meanwhile, the deeper systemic failures remain glaring. 2 of West Oakland's largest shelters are now slated to close by mid-2025. Not because the need has lessened, if anything, it's grown more urgent, but because of expired leases, bureaucratic delays, and financial bungling that city officials seem more interested in burying than fixing. In a city where thousands already sleep outside every night, the idea of shutting down shelters isn't just reckless, it borders on inhumane. And yet, the city's leadership still stands at podiums, touting progress with straight faces. How can Oakland claim to be addressing homelessness when it can't even keep its most basic safety nets intact? How can leaders celebrate so-called victories while actively dismantling the few lifelines people have left? Homelessness doesn't just steal dignity from individuals, it unravels the very threads that hold communities together. In Oakland, the neighborhoods bordering large encampments have seen firsthand the chaos that follows. Fires break out in abandoned lots. Property crimes spike in once quiet streets. Violent confrontations become part of daily life. Not an exception, but a new, grim norm. Local businesses, some family-owned for generations, are closing their doors, unable to survive the loss of customers and the constant threat of theft or vandalism. Families, fearful for their safety and weary of watching their parks and sidewalks transform into survival zones, are packing up and moving elsewhere. Public spaces meant for gatherings and celebrations now serve as battlegrounds between desperation and dwindling civic life. Meanwhile, another disaster grows silently, the environmental fallout. Untreated human waste seeps into the soil and waterways. Makeshift structures rot and collapse, leaving behind debris fields that no city crew can fully keep up with. Contaminated runoff pollutes creeks and rivers, affecting not just the homeless, but everyone in the surrounding area. Yet, in meeting rooms and press briefings, these realities are often softened, spun, or outright ignored. Homeless in America is no longer just a humanitarian crisis. It is an environmental emergency, an economic burden, and a moral indictment. And every day we delay meaningful action, the cost in lives, in livelihoods, and in the health of our cities grows heavier. Some areas in Oakland have become synonymous with human suffering. Lake Merritt, once a jewel of the city, now wrestles with the dual identity of scenic destination and encampment zone. East 12th Street, stretching along the BART tracks, has turned into a symbol of neglect, where hundreds live without basic sanitation or safety. The closure of the infamous Wood Street encampment was touted as a solution, yet alternative shelters remain woefully inadequate. With limited space and inconsistent services, each site tells the same story. Move them along, but never move them forward. At the heart of Oakland's homelessness crisis lies a tangled web of systemic failures that have been decades in the making. It's easy and politically convenient to point fingers at mental illness, substance abuse, or so-called bad decisions. But those explanations barely scratch the surface. The single most devastating driver is the chronic shortage of affordable housing. Oakland's housing market, like much of California, has spiraled out of reach for working-class families. For years, wages stagnated while rent prices soared, creating a widening gap between what people earn and what they need just to keep a roof over their heads. When even a full-time job can't guarantee stable housing, homelessness becomes less of an individual failure and more of a structural inevitability. Adding fuel to the fire is gentrification, a slow, relentless force that steadily displaces longtime residents, particularly in historically Black and Latino neighborhoods. As new developments move in and property values spike, The communities who built Oakland from the ground up find themselves pushed out, priced out, and left with nowhere to go. In many parts of the city, the vibrant culture that once defined Oakland is being erased, one eviction at a time. The end of pandemic-era eviction moratoriums only poured gasoline on an already raging fire. Without those protections, thousands of renters who had barely been hanging on were suddenly thrust into crisis. For Black and Latino households, already disproportionately impacted by systemic inequality, the fall was especially steep and fast. Despite these clear structural causes, too many officials continue to blame homelessness on lifestyle choices or personal failings. It's an easy narrative that shifts responsibility away from the broken systems they helped create. But anyone who has spent time talking to the people living in tents, under bridges, and in abandoned cars knows the truth. Homeless in America often begins not with addiction, not with laziness, but with something as simple as an unexpected medical bill, a sudden layoff, or a landlord's notice taped to a door. This crisis is not inevitable. It's not natural. It is the product of choices, of policies that prioritize developers over tenants, profit over people, and short-term gain over long-term stability. And until we have the courage to name those root causes for what they are, any attempt at a solution will be nothing more than window dressing on a crumbling foundation. If Oakland and the rest of the country truly want to tackle homelessness, we need to move beyond temporary patches and embrace real, lasting solutions. It's not enough to sweep sidewalks, clear camps, or shuffle people from one shelter to another. We need to build systems that actually heal, not just manage the damage after it's done. Permanent supportive housing must be the foundation of that system. Affordable housing units, paired with wraparound services like mental health support, addiction treatment, and employment assistance, are the only proven way to lift people out of homelessness for good. Building a few temporary shelters or transitional units isn't enough. We need permanent places where people can rebuild their lives without fear of being pushed back onto the streets. Access to mental health care and substance abuse treatment should be a right, not a privilege. Instead of criminalizing addiction or untreated mental illness, as we too often do, we must invest in compassionate, accessible care that addresses root causes, not just symptoms. We need mobile outreach teams, crisis intervention programs, and long-term therapy options that meet people where they are, both physically and emotionally. Financial and legal support must also be front and center. Preventing eviction before it happens is always cheaper and far less traumatic than trying to rescue families after they've already fallen into the abyss. Emergency rental assistance, free legal aid, and fair housing protections should be treated as necessities, not optional programs that depend on political whims or budget leftovers. But even with funding and services, if the system ignores the voices of those most affected, it will always fall short. True collaboration must happen between city leaders, nonprofits, grassroots organizers, and especially people with lived experience of homelessness. Their insight isn't optional. It's essential to building solutions that actually work on the ground. And above all, we must stop funneling public funds into luxury projects that masquerade as mixed-income developments. Resources must be directed toward deeply affordable housing that working families, single parents, veterans, and minimum wage workers can actually afford. Because homelessness isn't inevitable, it's a choice we make, or a choice we refuse to keep making. And the time to choose differently is long overdue. Homelessness in Oakland and across this nation is not a glitch in the system. It is the system speaking back to us. It is a mirror, brutally honest, showing a society that long ago decided that profits matter more than people, that appearances matter more than real solutions. And maybe the hardest truth is this: the tragedy of homeless in America isn't just about the tents, the suffering, the streets. It's about us. It's about the way we've learned, almost instinctively, to look away. We pass by human suffering with headphones in, eyes averted, hearts carefully protected by the belief that it's not our problem. But it is. It always has been. Housing isn't some luxury to be earned only by the deserving. It's a fundamental right, as basic as water, as essential as air. When cities allow people to rot in plain sight, when governments cut corners and call it policy, when voters turn homelessness into a political talking point instead of a human emergency, the rot doesn't stay at the margins. It eats away at the center, at the soul of the community itself. No society that normalizes homelessness can claim to be healthy or strong or just. Until we recognize that basic human dignity cannot be reserved for the few, until we act like every person's survival matters, our cities will keep crumbling, not from lack of resources, but from lack of will. Oakland shows us what happens when indifference is treated like a strategy. The question is, how much longer are we willing to look away? The crisis unfolding in Oakland is not inevitable. It is the result of choices, and it can be changed with better ones. We must demand bold, systemic change, not timid half measures. Challenge elected officials, support organizations fighting for real solutions. Advocate for affordable housing initiatives. Refuse to accept homelessness as just the way things are. Because behind every statistic is a human being, and behind every human being is a story worth saving. Oakland, like many cities, stands at a crossroads. Continue down the path of neglect and pretense, or rise to the occasion with courage, compassion, and action. The future of homeless in America and the soul of our communities depends on what we choose next. Oakland today stands as a warning, not an exception. The Homeless in America crisis is not some uncontrollable storm that happened overnight. It's the slow, deliberate result of policies written without compassion, budgets approved without vision, and a society increasingly comfortable with inequality as the cost of doing business. The road ahead isn't easy, but it's clear. Build real homes, not Band-Aid shelters. Invest in mental health care, not endless sweeps. Protect tenants before they slip through the cracks. And most importantly, refuse to accept that homelessness is inevitable. Every day, the streets of Oakland write a story. The only question left is whether we have the courage to change the ending. The future of homeless in America and the humanity of our cities depends on what we do next.